All right, so without further ado, the agenda for today is we're going to do 2 of these this year is the plan. But this is the first of a 2-part series, I guess we could call it. And we're calling this a professionalization workshop for students. By that, we mean faculty panel to provide some quick thoughts and advice from our experience for students in our department about, in this case, applying for graduate school and how to think about applying for graduate school, how to prepare for graduate school, how to prepare for applying for graduate school, and so on. So we're going to have each of our faculty here give some short, brief advice to each of you in turn, and we're going to open it up to questions and discussion. And we'd really like that to be driven by your concerns about how you should be thinking about graduate school, or is graduate school for you, or what type of graduate school program should you apply for, and how you prepare for that, and so on. In the winter semester, we plan on doing one that's more focused on the job market, jobs inside and outside of academia. And we're hoping to put together a panel, not just of our faculty, actually it might be heavier of not our faculty, people actually using anthropological type of training in various sorts of career positions to talk about those potential trajectories. So that's it. Our faculty panel today is, we have Dr. Cindy Finlayson, Greg Thompson, doctors, I should say, Cindy Finlayson, Greg Thompson, Mike Searcy, Jim Allison. I don't know if he's here yet, but he's going to be signing on a minute or two late. Myself, I see Zach Chase is here as well. So we'll go more or less in I think, I don't have the order that I said in front of me, but I think I said Cindy, Mike, Greg, Jim, and then me and maybe Zach. So we can go in that order. We're each going to speak for less than 5 minutes and just kind of give you some our top tips and advice and things we think you should be thinking about when you apply for graduate school. And then we'll open it up for questions after each of us kind of give our 2 cents. So let's also do this. Let's say you can submit questions on the chat function. You could send those directly to me or to the whole group. It doesn't matter. In fact, why don't you just do it to the whole group and we'll look at those questions as they come up. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for coming today. So I'm going to kind of sort of get right to the point since we're limited on time. I just set my timer, so I'll stop when I'm supposed to stop. First of all, I'm going to go back to an old Greek philosophy, and that is the most important thing is to know yourself. What is it? Who are you? What are you going to really love to do for the rest of your life? Going to be really invested in, and then figure out how you're going to do that. So think about yourself, where you want to be in the next 5 years, where you want to be in the next 10 years, and if you really understand, if you're in the discipline of anthropology, whether you're in social cultural or you're in archaeology, this is a writing discipline, but it also is a field discipline. That means that if you don't like to travel, you don't like to fly, you don't like to be engaging with all different kinds of people in different cultures one-on-one, whether they're live persons in social cultural or dead persons that you're digging up in archaeology, you're still going to have to deal with live people in the field in archaeology. This is not your discipline. So that's really important to understand going into graduate school and picking the program that you want to be in. Next, while you're here at BYU, talk to as many faculty members as possible. We are really invested in you. We really want to see you succeed. We really want you to be prepared to go out there no matter what venue or route you decide to choose. So talk to as many faculty in the department and outside the department and related departments as you can, and get different perspectives about what you're thinking as far as a professional venue. And then since we have so many women in our department now, this used to be a male-dominated field, but we have 80% women students in the anthropology program right now. And I know you guys have special challenges because I've been there, still am. So This is something you've got to really think about. And don't, this is going to sound really maybe a little bit inappropriate at BYU, but don't count on the fact that you're going to get married, or if you are married, that you're going to stay married, or that if you get married, that your husband's going to be able to support you. And you need to understand, if you're going to go on in the field of anthropology, you can mix anthropology and family very easily. It's one of the better disciplines where you can do that. But if you're going to marry someone, make sure that you have a spouse that's on board with a joint plan about how you're going to do that and mesh it with family life, because that's probably one of the most serious things you need to think about. Then keep up your grade point average here. Most graduate schools, they're looking at people that have grade point averages 3.6 and above, sometimes 3.8, okay? And don't just think that a regular course of work, like the program in the department, is going to get you anywhere. We've got a small department. Find other opportunities to get practical experience along with the classes that you're taking. So right now, it's critically important to get computer applications to both social, cultural, and archaeology. Go down, particularly if you're in archaeology, and talk to Scott Ure, talk to Dr. Searcy. They've both taught a joint course on technology, but get introduced down at the MPC to Scott Ure and Paul Stabist down there at the museum. Or go to, if you're interested, for example, in forensics, go to the biology department. Find ways that you can get internships, practical experience, and during the summer, find jobs that build your resume. Okay, so if you're in archaeology and you're staying in the Four Corners area, look at jobs with the Park Service or the BLM. If you have the opportunity to get grants to go overseas, get as much overseas experience as you can if you're interested in old world archaeology or other areas of the world. So you need to look viable, and you need to look like you're not parochial when you go to apply for high quality graduate programs. And then know what the program is you're going into. What are their prerequisites? What are the classes that you could take less expensively at BYU that would then be on a graduate program's ticket list that they want to see that you've had, okay? So I often tell my classical students, go out and take Greek if you're going to work in the Eastern Empire, or take Latin if you're going to work in the Western Roman Empire. Or research languages. Get those requirements in addition to modern technological requirements and experience and hands-on experience that will really make you look desirable as a student. And that's my time. So thank you very much.
Just quickly, Dr. Finlayson meant Bureau of Land Management by BLM.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a confusing acronym this past summer for me doing fieldwork down there. Okay, so let's, one thing I will note, I am keeping some notes here, and we will make a document available for students, and maybe I'll share the screen during the Q&A. But let's go ahead and jump to Mike Searcy.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I could echo several of the things that Dr. Finlayson said. You know, it all depends. You know, that's kind of one of the things I say when it comes to looking at graduate schools, and specifically what you want to do. I think for me, I would say taking classes that appeal to you, specifically those that may be the areas that you want to study later on, is yes, very important. My opinion of your undergraduate education is get as broad as you can. I think that if you can do that, you in fact show that you have some breadth of experience and information. And I think the education you'll get here at BYU, you have a lot of opportunities to take classes that deal with you know, modern living cultures throughout the world, but also all the variable classes that we teach in archaeology that are associated with different prehistoric cultures. And so Personally, I believe an undergraduate education, it's okay to be broad, and it's actually good in some situations. And we do have classes that are geared towards helping you guys get prepared. As an archaeologist, I will also echo what Dr. Finlayson said, get as much experience as you can. Your degree is going to be unique on both the sociocultural side and archaeology side, because not many anthropology programs out there, I say not many, I can't say that statistically speaking, but I would say not all for sure require a field school. Yours does, and we also require a capstone, which means when you come out of this program, you will also not only have actual field experience, if you're an archaeologist, putting shovels in the ground or dealing with artifacts in a museum or whatever it might be, but you also have a writing sample, which many graduate programs ask for. And so that capstone project, think about it as your jumping off point. Not only that, the last thing that I'll mention is that, you know, if you're planning to go to grad school, much of your job, or much of what you're trying to do here, is get us to write you letters of recommendation, right? So get close to a professor that you think can help you get into grad school. Identify those who might have connections in different places that you want to go. And of course, we can help you guys when it comes to that point to help you make that transition. Most grad programs require you to apply in the fall for the following fall. Applications start like as late as November, December, and then go all the way into, I think some are due, like our program, we have them due in February. But that's almost a year before you'll be admitted to your program that you need to be thinking about and identifying the different programs that you might go to. And then also note, put aside a little bit of money, because graduate applications cost money, as does taking the GRE, which is the standard entrance exam for most graduate programs. I think that's all I have to say, but I'm always open to talk to any students about archaeology graduate programs. There's some that are geared towards different areas of the world. And so a lot of the times you're looking for a program that to work with a particular person that you want to emphasize in that particular region of the world where they work. So that's something to think about when you're looking at grad programs. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hickman.
All right, I'll send it right over to Greg Thompson.
All right, I'm joining you here from Harper Library at University of Chicago. It's a lovely place. So I would say, as far as preparing for grad school, for those of you that have already made the decision, the one piece of advice I think is the most important thing is always to know the schools that you're applying to. Ideally, know the faculty that you would like to work with. Make sure you know their work. As an academic, as a researcher, there's nothing more flattering than somebody having read your work and understood it and ask you a question about it or comment about it. So this is a great way to get to make connections. It's fairly easy to do if you're willing to take the time to read somebody's work. And you'll know whether or not their work seems like a fit for you. And then you have to figure out whether the fit is mutual and you're a fit for them as well, and they'll do some of that work too. So know the schools where you're applying, make sure you have a good feel for what kind of a program it is, and that you can speak intelligently about it in your application. For as far as the decision of master's versus PhD, all that kind of thing, I think the most important thing with a PhD is to know that a PhD is about research. And so you really want to know, and you have a great opportunity here at BYU in undergrad to have had some experience with research, and you kind of get to know whether or not this is something that you'd like to do. If you go the academic route following a PhD, then you're going to be spending your time doing research, writing up research, applying for grants for research. It's all research, research, research. The teaching is part of it, but if you if you do the, unless you do community colleges or maybe liberal arts colleges are a little bit more teaching heavy. Even at BYU, where they do place a good emphasis on teaching, still research is the primary thing. So so know that about a PhD. Now that said, there are other things you can do with research, and they're very practical things you can do with research. So a PhD can be a useful thing if you're going into a bunch of different fields. Jacob and I did our PhDs in the same department at University of Chicago, and we had a number of our colleagues that did other things, that went and did consulting or worked for the government doing research type things for the government. So those are very different kinds of jobs, but there are lots of options if you do a PhD. But know that the PhD route, at the other end of it, it's difficult as far as jobs go. I think that's something that I would feel like I was doing some kind of educational malpractice if I didn't tell you that it's tough when you get to the other end of a PhD. As far as finding jobs, finding employment in academia. And I suspect it'll probably not get better in the next 10 years, which would be roughly the span for a PhD. Given the climate of everything, I don't see things necessarily getting better. So, so be aware of that and know that. You really have to love it. You have to love what you're doing. And do it. And sometimes, and Zach and I have mentioned this, sometimes you're just cursed to being an academic and you can't do anything about it. And that's that. So you just have to deal with it. Another thing that I think is really important.
On that point, can I just offer a clarification? Is it fair to say that what you're saying is getting an academic job on the other side of the PhD is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Both our friends that have not gone the academic route, they're probably at least making twice our salary, we should point out. Like, they haven't had a hard time finding jobs, but they intended to go into academia and that didn't necessarily work out for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the academic route, I've had students before who've been like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to want to do. So I think I'll just go get a PhD and become a professor. And I'm like, no, don't. That you're going to make yourself miserable. That is not. This isn't like, oh, I don't know what to do. I think I'll just do this kind of thing. This is you better be passionate about it, and you better know this is what you're dedicated to doing. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And if that's the case, then do it. The one other thing I wanted to mention is the importance of what you do here. The fact that you really need to know that the research you do in your senior theses on both sides of the department is a rare thing. This is not the kind of thing that most college graduates are doing. Okay, it is really remarkable what you all do as far as the thesis research. So you have to know that. And it isn't enough to know that, though. You have to be able to articulate that to other people. So whether it's whatever it might be that you're applying for, whether it's academic or further schooling, graduate schools you're applying to, or whether it's a job, whether it's professional schools, an MBA program or a JD program, you have to know that that is going to be one of the coolest things you can tell them about, and you have to make sure you tell them about it multiple times. Okay, it should be on your, it should be very clearly on your resume that you did independent, self-directed research in Korea, wherever it was, and you need to be very clear about what it was. And then people will ask you about it, and it'll be a talking point. It'll be a way to really shine in an interview, regardless of what the interview is. So be aware of that. You might try publishing while you're an undergrad too, publishing some of your work. That's something that will, it will give you a huge leg up in applications if you're applying to grad schools. And it also will help you know, like, is this something you like doing? Is this something, do you like the work of putting together a paper? I think I'll leave it at that. I took a little bit extra time, so.
Jacob, could I just add something to what Greg was saying?
Go for it.
Just to remind everybody, one of the advantages of doing a graduate program here at BYU in anthropology is the option that you can also do the museum certificate. And so you're essentially, what you're doing is taking a dual master's in a way. And that allows you to have two doors open for possible employment, okay? Particularly if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and you're a woman and at that age where you're getting married and starting to have a family, this can allow you some flexibility where you've not closed the door to go on to get a graduate degree or a PhD later, or whenever it fits your family circumstances or your personal circumstances, but you're immediately hireable. So we have hired, to my knowledge, we've only, of all the people who have gone through the museum certificate program, there's only one that has not been hired, and that person didn't want to be hired because of a health issue. And some people have been hired before they even finished the program, because there is a dire need for trained museum professionals here in the Intermountain West and other places. And the program tries to get you out into an internship that is very practical, hands-on, and prestigious. So it goes along with the field work you've had in either social cultural anthropology or archaeology, and kind of makes you dually attractive, okay? And really have had some practical hands-on experiences that other applicants will not have had, okay?
Very good. All right, let's go to Jim Allison, which, by the way, I'm sharing another screen here where I'm gonna broadcast these notes. And for you faculty, if I've missed some of the main points that you'd like on there, maybe send me a chat and I can add that. But let's go ahead and go to, in fact, when I share my screen, it makes it the default. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen until faculty are done talking.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Well, I'm probably mostly going to reiterate things people have already said. One of the things I tell people about, especially about getting a PhD, is if you can imagine living your life without a PhD and being happy, don't do it. Right? And maybe that's a little strong, but if you've got something inside you that just tells you that, you know, you'll always feel like you gave up or something if you don't go on and do the PhD, then maybe you should. But if you don't really have that drive, you're probably better off most of the time not doing it. The academic job market is terrible, as Greg said, and it just doesn't pay off really to. I mean, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of earnings you're giving up by not going on the job market, and you just really have to want to do it, or you shouldn't do it. Secondly, I would make a pitch, and I think Greg just did this in the chat too, for our master's program. The master's program has a couple of advantages. First off, it probably is a good investment, right? Because if you really want, you know, I know archaeology better, and we haven't really had anyone graduate in social cultural yet, so we don't know how this is going to work out. But if you want to stay in archaeology, if that's what you want to do, you really probably need a master's degree to get a decent job. You can get jobs with a bachelor's degree, but they're probably not going to, they'll be temporary. You'll jump from project to project. If you want a good job, a master's degree is the ticket. Most of those jobs in government agencies, in CRM, cultural resource management firms, don't require a PhD, but the good ones require a master's degree. So our master's program can help you with that. But then also, I think, let me just say, I don't think we've ever had one of our master's students apply to a PhD program and not get in somewhere, right? I mean, sometimes they've applied to multiple programs and not gotten in all of them. But everybody who's wanted to go on from our master's program to a PhD in the 15 years I've been here has done it. And generally without too much trouble. Another thing I'd say about, particularly about PhD programs, is don't pay for a PhD program. If they aren't going to offer you money, they don't really want you, or they want your money more than they want you as a student. So I think you want to be careful. Most programs at least will offer some money, scholarships at least. Sometimes it's the form of scholarships and teaching assistantships or research assistantships, but definitely shop around and see what programs will offer. In terms of preparation, I agree taking a broad range of courses is important. Paying attention, I think, to the field and how it's changing, and I would say there's some things you ought to be maybe trying to get as much, I would say computer experience, computational archaeology is becoming a big thing. I don't know that it's doing the same thing on the social cultural side, but GIS, being able to do that, being able to do statistics, being able to do modeling, those are all becoming much more important. And so I think anything you can do, and I can help you with some of that. Dr. Searcy, Scott can help you with some of that. Those are things that you really want to do, and just try and get as broad a range of skills as you can.
Attending the seminar can do that.
Attending the seminar will certainly help because you get exposed. You know, we've got a small faculty, right? We've got, I mean, nothing wrong with anybody here who's teaching you, but there's much more out there in the wide world of archaeology and social cultural anthropology. And so the seminar will expose you to lots of things. You just want to prepare yourself as broadly as possible. Your classes will help you, but never assume that that's enough. That's not everything you need to know. And the more you know, the better off you'll be. Maybe I should just stop there. That's about 5 minutes worth. So,
Jake, could I just kind of clarify something Dr. Allison just said? Depending on the region of the world that you're interested in working in, will depend on whether a master's is going to be enough. Okay. Well, and while it's true that if you're going to work in the United States, particularly Four Corners, you know, Southwest Great Basin, if you have a master's, you can probably find employment at any of the government agencies or possibly private archaeological firms. If you're going to work in the old world, however, you have to have a PhD or you have to have some kind of specialized training. So for example, conservation, the conservator, or you've got to really focus on what you can offer technologically. So, and you have to realize too that academia has shifted. It kind of related to what Dr. Thompson was saying with difficulty of finding academic jobs. Someone came to me recently and said, well, I'm just going to get a master's and teach at a community college. Well, that's not necessarily possible anymore because a lot of your competition are going to be people that are either have a PhD or in their PhD program. And you coming in with just a master's and say limited field experience or none are not going to be competitive, okay? So that is also why the program we have here at BYU, particularly the undergraduate program, and then the opportunities at the master's level to go out in the field in numerous experiences that are available, and often faculty have grants to help you with that, okay, is really important because that's going to make or break how viable you're going to appear, either applying for another graduate program or applying for a professional position. So check the region of the world that you're interested in to find out how the lay of the land is professionally as well as academically, because it's different depending on where that region of the world is, right?
Zach, do you want to throw a couple comments out there?
Sure. I just mostly ratify what everybody has said up to this point. I guess I would, the two things very briefly would be the answer to the question, what can somebody do with an anthropology undergraduate degree, whether it's graduate school or work, is the same as the answer to what can anyone do with any undergraduate degree. And the answer is whatever you do with it. And what I mean by that is, I think especially at BYU, my experience has been, we are at a veritable playground of opportunity, research opportunity, collaboration opportunity with faculty. Let's call it a work ground instead of a playground. But I mean, there's just no end to the things that you can get involved in and get experience with while you're at BYU through funding, through work with faculty, through formal programs, through student employment. And so just like the rest of your life, what you're going to be able to do will count on how much initiative you take in making your own path for yourself, going out and taking advantage of the tremendous offerings that are here. Then I would say the final thing is, I think most of us, when we're in something like a program, say an undergraduate program, our default position is to do what we need to finish assignments or get through assignments. And I say most of us do that, meaning I do it. That's, you know, I do that in my own work and the things that I have to do. But I think the most powerful thing that you can do as undergraduates is actually take the time, actually put the work and effort into learning how to read well, learning how to read critically, learning how to write well. Everybody can write. Almost no one can write well, including myself. But you can learn, you can improve to do it. You can improve how you, I mean, and it's a matter of actually caring about it, actually putting attention and effort into learning the craft of writing better. And if you can focus on, you know, critical thinking, critical reading, and good writing, that is the foundation, I think, for good things.
Could I add to that just a little bit? Please, you know, be diligent. A lot of the faculty, including myself, I usually have 5 full ride grants to give out every year for Petra. Other faculty have other grants. And I'm not going to give it to somebody who is always late to class, doesn't come to class, doesn't turn in assignments, turns in assignments late, doesn't take initiative in the class. I can't afford to have somebody like that in the field where we're finishing a contract with a foreign government and we have to be out early in the morning, we work all day, we have to do lab work in the evenings and afternoons. If you're not demonstrating in the class that you're taking initiative for your own education, are a responsible person and a hardworking person, then that kind of shuts down opportunities for faculty to notice you and want to share their really valuable grant money to take you out in the field with them, or to get you involved in other projects, or to recommend you on a recommendation letter. So please be aware that your performance in class is really critical, both as an undergraduate and a graduate student.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. I'm actually going to share 2 screens. One is notes that I have from when I do this sort of meeting with students. I've done this for the Anthropology Club in years past. And the other is notes I've been taking on this meeting, and I'm happy to share both. And I'm not going to go through all these, but these are, I'm happy to share these with you. One is thinking about the GRE. The GRE is a necessary evil in much of American graduate programs. I disagree with that, frankly. but it's a necessary evil that if you're planning on doing a graduate program in the US, you'll most likely have to come across. So think about that timeline. People have already talked about letters of recommendation. I want to add to something that Mike said. Cultivate that relationship with faculty and also make it easy for them to write you a letter. The letter will be higher quality and it's more likely to get in on time the more that you work to do that. I have a whole system that whenever anybody asks me for a letter, I say, okay, here, go put it on my calendar and give me all this information so I can just sit down and easily do it. Yeah, let's see. Academic conferences and publications. I want to sort of nod, second that. We've got some notes there we could share. The good writing samples. So the more serious you take the senior thesis sequence in our program, the higher quality your writing sample will be, because that should be the best writing sample, demonstrating that you've done 3 months of fieldwork somewhere, or at least a couple of months of fieldwork somewhere. You wrote a proposal for that, you carried out the fieldwork, you did a systematic analysis, you sought out cutting edge theory to help you understand it. It should be head and shoulders above most writing samples that graduate programs get, frankly. I mean, I had good qualifications when I applied to the University of Chicago, or all the programs that I applied for. But the thing that really stuck out in my portfolio, and I was an undergrad here at BYU, was the extensive research experience. I'd had at that point 3 summers of ethnographic fieldwork, had presented that work in conferences and submitted it to publications. My GPA was good. My GRE scores were solid, not amazing, but solid. But the thing that really stuck out was my research experience. And I applied to like 11 programs and I got into 3. I got into my 3 top choices. I didn't get into my safety schools. And part of that is that applying for graduate school has as much to do with fit as it does your qualifications. Qualifications generally are seen as you have to be above a certain threshold. But once you're above that threshold, the question that the faculty committee asks is, who is a good fit with us? So it's in a sense not surprising that I got into my 3 top choices, because those 3 top choices were the people that I really wanted to work with at those institutions. Anyway, so, that I can't stress enough what others have already said about the senior thesis sequence and taking that seriously, and how not only the skills you develop, but the tangible product, the thesis that comes out of that, should be one of your most valuable assets in applying to graduate school. And yes, you should reach out and you should talk to and ask questions about the research of the faculty that you would like to work with in those programs. This is also one of the reasons I think I got into my top 3 choices. I was sending a whole bunch of emails out to people in these 3 programs that I got accepted into. And I sent emails to basically a faculty member in every program that I applied to, but I really put a lot of time and effort into those correspondences with the people that I really wanted to work with. And that ended up actually paying off. And you have to be genuinely interested in their work, and you have to be reading their work. You have to realize, as you're reading their work, you're not just thinking about how interesting it is, but is this somebody I want to work with? I would encourage you to apply for research grants at the time you apply for graduate school. So for example, you could, if you got an NSF graduate research fellowship at the time that you're applying for graduate school, you might actually, let's say you make a waiting list on one of the programs you want to get into and you're bringing your own funding, that might be the thing that puts you over the top. And regardless, if you get into a program and you get the grant, it's some of those grants like the Javits or the NSF GRFP, these are fantastic awards that can help you be more financially comfortable. And we could talk for a long time about how to craft a severe statement of purpose, but I'll just leave it at that with those notes there. I have, you can all look at the gallery view and look at the other screen that I'm sharing if you want to look at the notes that I've made in this meeting. But yeah, one other thing I wanted to say about paying for programs. What Jim said is true in the US. It's not true elsewhere. So we could talk, if people like to, about UK versus US graduate programs. Funding is much harder to come by in the UK system, but at the same time, the time to degree is actually a lot shorter. And the programs, even the top programs, are actually a lot cheaper than American programs. So there is a trade-off in terms of funding and time to degree and so on, which we could talk about if people like. So
Jake, can I just add though, UK is that way, but if you get in any of the EU countries, I'm not sure if it's all of them, probably not all of them, but like places like Germany and some of the Scandinavian countries, you can get into those universities. They basically will, you know, there's no tuition and so on for some of them, and in the right place. So outside the US, they have sort of a different arrangement. They don't, like the US tends to charge lots of tuition and then grant scholarships to certain students to avoid it. But some of the European countries actually do it differently. UK actually tends to, I mean, I almost think some of it's kind of a scam where they have programs where they, particularly some of the master's degree programs, where they just try to pull in US students and charge them through the nose. And
it is true that international students for master's degree programs is a moneymaker, and that's not just true of UK programs. That's true of US programs, right?
Yeah,
but at the same time,
usually they don't. I mean, I know some British archaeologists who flat out admitted that basically that's how they fund a lot of their program, right?
No, and that's
not
true.
just,
it's true at the University of Chicago.
It's not just that it makes money, but that it's a deliberate strategy to kind of overcharge to make money. And I think you have to be careful.
Well, they don't just, well, it's like us, we have different rates of charging depending on whether you're LDS or not, or what, in other schools, it's whether you're a resident state or whether you're a resident of the country. Yeah. And they also charge a different rate for students coming in from China, from, you know, it isn't just US students.
I don't think we need to spend all of our time debating that. But one thing that I would say is that in the one thing that's increasingly common in the EU, on almost all of the academic mailing lists that are international that I'm on, like about diaspora studies or morality or psychological anthropology, I will see all the time advertisements for doctoral fellowships. Basically what happens here is that in the EU, a professor might get a big, huge grant, and built into that grant would be a PhD studentship that you can apply for. And basically you have to do your dissertation on the project that those professors have the funding for, right? So it's almost like a pre-packaged funding package and dissertation topic all into one. If you get on a mailing list that you're interested in, you might see these types of opportunities that you can apply for. And once again, the research experience that you'll get in our program would make you very competitive for those. But that's increasingly common in Europe. It's less common here in the US. But that's one good way to pursue funding internationally is sort of that model. And I'm sure some of us could give you more specific advice on that. Let's start jumping through the questions here.
Jake, could we answer Hannah Taylor's question first?
Why don't you take it?
She's asking, will there be an online option for the Social Culturals Master's Program? Over my dead body, okay? And I'm answering for the social cultural people as an archaeologist. We saw this last semester the decline in what your experience is online versus what an in-class experience is. I would be leery of any online master's program anywhere to take it because the quality is just not the same. The experience is just not the same. I think there may come the day when we may offer a few classes online, but you really have to be careful. I went through a lot of these programs when we were going through a exterior review to kind of compare what we're doing in our department. Some of them are just Mickey Mouse. I mean, they're just not worth anything. So be very, very careful. And yeah, I know we had some people in art history, because of their marriage situation, did a distance learning PhD and in Europe, and it just is not perceived to be of the same quality as someone who's gone through a regular program. So that's my opinion. Maybe others have a different opinion.
So yeah, I mean, I would agree that that is not a direction that the program would go as a program. That being said, we have had there are instances, and not even just with graduates, this has come up with graduate students, but also with undergrads, where let's say you get 95% of your coursework done in, say, a year in residence. Basically, you can get most of your coursework done after a year in our program, maybe 3 semesters. And it's not inconceivable that you figure out something in terms of readings courses or other courses where you can actually finish the program elsewhere. But a program where you're 100% not in residence, I don't see that ever happening. But at the same time, once you get through the bulk of the coursework, you can write your thesis from, you know, anywhere, and our students do. Like, many of our graduate students spend a lot of their time, if not all their time, away from campus once they're done with the coursework phase. So if you have a personal situation, you could talk to one of our faculty and look at the course requirements for the graduate program and see what that might look like in terms of, you know, your, maybe it's a spousal job issue or something like that, right? I don't know if that, okay, so let's just, if I'm planning, so just jumping down the line here, did I miss anybody before that? Alexa said, what does BYU look for in applicants for a master's program? And then what does it look for in professors? Okay, so, I mean, basically BYU is not fundamentally different from any other institution, right? So, I mean, my initial response to this would be fit, right? I would second what I just said, which is you have to, qualifications get you above a threshold, but it doesn't mean that the program, any program, wants to admit you. You have to be wanting to do research that actually aligns with the training that the faculty are qualified to offer, right? So one difference between an undergraduate program and a graduate program is that as undergraduates, we see ourselves as teaching, faculty see themselves as teaching students. For graduate students, faculty see themselves as training the next generation of their colleagues. That's really the difference, in my view. I don't know if any of you else have comments about that.
I think at the graduate level too, the sub goal is to prepare the student to be competitive for what their next step is. Okay, whether it's going to be a PhD or whether it's going to be a professional position. And we've had circumstances where individuals have come into the program not understanding what a graduate program was. Okay, they just thought they'd come in, take a bunch of classes. Hey, I have an MA. It's not like that. Okay, you have certain classes you're required to take, then you supplement them depending on what your end goals are for the next step in your life. And you've got to do a thesis, which is really, really intense. So it means working with a data set, developing that data set, or working with a data set that a professor is willing to share with you, doing field work. So it isn't just coming to classes. It's much more involved. And it's the next step to prepare you to be a professional, as well as the next generation of wherever you're going to be. And in anthropology, you've got lots of ways, lots of directions you can go. I mean, there's humanitarian work, there internationally as well as nationally. There are all kinds of things that you can do with that degree. So it just depends on what your interests are. We can't tell you who you are. You have to know that when you come here, so that you can focus and we can help you focus on what will prepare you best. Okay.
Can I also just say, if you want to pose a question, rather than putting it in the chat, go ahead and use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you. It'd be great to get some oral questions as well, rather than just us reading your questions and responding. So please, if you have follow-up or something, please raise your hand and I'll look for that and we can call on you as well. So, okay. Sonia, in fact, Sonia, I have to ask you about your question. If I'm planning on a career in applied anthropology, what kinds of grad programs should I be looking at? I think that would depend on whether you're talking about applied archaeology or applied cultural anthropology. Which one are you asking about, Sonia?
Cultural.
Okay. I'll say something real quick. I would suggest you go to sfaa.net, the Society for Applied Anthropology.net, which is it's actually completely separate from the American Anthropological Association. It's specifically a Society for Applied Anthropological Work. And they actually have a list, or at least last time I looked a couple of years ago, but their website has a list of applied specific programs. So actually one of the programs I got into was Teachers College at Columbia. So Columbia has 2 PhD programs. They have the traditional PhD program, but then have an applied PhD program in what's called Teachers College. But you could do a PhD or master's degree in applied anthropology. And I do want to, following up on what Greg said and what some of you have alluded to, a PhD is not just for academia. I think that's actually a misnomer. I used to believe when Greg and I both started here, we used to talk about this a lot, about how we, the moral reticence and suggesting that you pursue a PhD program because academic jobs are so scarce. But both of us have seen our friends and colleagues with PhDs actually start a lot higher on the food chain in the private sector with their PhDs. All of my friends that sort of like started in this route, I started seeing common themes in them describing like their first project in consulting. And that was that they would treat it like an academic paper, write a 45-page report fully annotated with all the sources. They plop it down on the desk of the CEO and they say, I'm not going to read that. I want you to give me like 2 slides. I'm paying you because I know you're the nerd. I know you're the expert. I want your opinion, A or B. That's why I'm paying you. I'm paying you so I don't have to read your 45-page report, right? But the point being is that having a PhD makes you sort of the smartest person in the room in these professional, private sector contexts. And so I actually think it's a mistake to say that the only productive thing you can do with a PhD is go into the academic world, because in fact, everybody I know that's gone that way, their stories suggest otherwise, and they wouldn't have gotten there with a master's. They wouldn't have started where they started with a master's. Any other thoughts from other faculty about applied programs, maybe applied archaeology?
We have Chelsea Shields Strayer, a graduate of our department, who went on to get a PhD at Boston College. Boston College, Boston University.
Boston University.
Boston University. She describes the reality of the world out there, that people do not know how to do research. Okay. People, and I'm talking about both kinds of research, like empirical, collect data research, and books in the library research. People out in the world do not know how to do research. Even the people that work for companies that do research oftentimes do not know how to do research. So she described sitting in a room of people that were part of a consulting group, and their task was to do some research on wearables, like things that measure your heart rate and things. And she's like, everybody went to Google and started Googling, heart rate wearables or something like that. And she's like, I hopped onto the university website, you get behind the paywall, and there's so much out there about good hard research that's been done about, what works, what indicators, what kind of indicators will tell you what kind of things about different things. What does it mean to have a skin galvanic response of a certain kind? And she was able to pull the research together very quickly. So you should all know that being able to do research is a highly valued thing. And I keep feeling like it's becoming more and more valuable the more that information is just being strewn about everywhere. To be able to do good research is really valuable. So I also threw up a link to this group, EPIC, that is advancing the value of ethnography in industry. Just as an example, you don't necessarily even have to go to do an applied program If you can find it, it's a little bit hard to find the jobs, but if you can find the jobs and you can articulate your skill set to a company so that they understand what it is that you can bring to them, then you can go straight into industry. Now, there are a lot of programs out there that are applied programs. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things you have to, I don't know them that well. I don't know if Jacob knows them better. I know University of Northern Arizona. We had somebody at Wayne State. We've had a few students in recent years that have done the master's program. Know that you're going to be paying for a master's program, so beware of that too. So there might be cases where it makes more sense just to go into industry if you have an idea of what you want to be doing. And just start doing it, and then decide if you need a master's or a PhD. I'd highly recommend that. Don't be scared about it. And that way you're paying for your way in the meantime, and you're figuring out whether you need a master's, do you need a PhD, and you might, and then you can go do it.
University of North Texas, one of our alum is on the faculty there. University of Alaska Anchorage has one of the longest running applied anthropology programs. Columbia has a PhD in applied anthropology in Teachers College. University of South Florida has a PhD. So if you can get a PhD, there's a hybrid track where you actually do applied anthropological research, publish and teach, and do applied work. So it's sort of like you're in between, you're in academia, but your body of research is, the nature of it is applied work as well.
Where is that, Jacob?
Yeah, sorry.
Where was that you said, where you can teach and do the applied work and then do your research?
So what I'm pointing to is the distinction between a master's in applied anthropology and a PhD in applied anthropology, and the PhDs in applied anthropology becoming more common. And what people would do with that is either you'd enter the private sector as the expert in the room with the credentials of a PhD, right? Or you could actually also potentially get an academic job in an applied anthropology program as sort of the, applied anthropologist on staff, as it were. All right, so I see that some of the other faculty, Mike and Greg, have been fielding a lot of those questions in the chat. So Mike, just point to the fact, if you're not following the chat, Mike pointed to a catalog of programs. I would add to that the best way to find a program is to find the literature that you're most interested in reading and looking those people up and what programs they're in, right? Because if a book totally blows your mind, or an article or a couple of articles by an author blows your mind, and you're like, this is what I want to do, you should figure out where that person is teaching and look into their graduate program, right?
Jake, can I throw something in here? I sort of hesitate because I don't want to be too much of a downer, but I think you want to be careful in looking into people as well, right? Find the person you want to work with, but make sure that you really want to work with them, because one of the things about graduate school is you tend to get in these relationships where you've got one faculty member who you work with closely, and they potentially have a lot of control over you, what you do and whether you succeed. And some of those relationships can turn toxic. And so one of the things you want to do in investigating graduate programs, as you get serious about it, and maybe you don't do this till you're admitted in a couple of places or something, but talk to students and see what their experience has been, and try and find a healthy place to go, right? That's not going to be abusive, because there are places that, I could name a couple of programs that I always steer people away from. Anyway, just saying.
Good advice. Take a good look at the pond before you pull out a fish.
And then smell the fish.
Yeah.
And then taste it.
We've had
Don't go to Harvard.
I've had conversations with multiple of our graduates who went on to PhD programs elsewhere and needed an impartial ear slash somebody to get advice from about how to navigate these politics with advisors who might have psychiatric issues or political issues in the department and so on. So I mean, it's a real thing. So that's really important advice.
Jake, I think everybody, the other aspect is, please realize that you've been in a program or programs here at BYU where the faculty is, as I said, is very invested in trying to help you succeed. And we often, when we're working with you, particularly as research TAs or research assistants or whatever, we are often attempting to treat you as if you are colleagues, okay, in a way. That isn't necessarily what the cultural paradigm is in other universities, okay? Other universities can be very, very structured in their pecking orders. So let me give you an example. We had a student over in art history who went on for a PhD at University of Iowa. We all gave her high recommendations. She got to the University of Iowa and she tried to tell her graduate program what she was going to do, not what they wanted her to do. She lasted a year, they kicked her out. Okay, so just realize you need to, as anthropologists, figure out what the culture is in the graduate program that you're going to. And how that works, because it may be substantially different socially than it is here at BYU, okay?
Can I add to that?
Go for it.
So there's like, it depends on the program, but like I had a student, Jaron Davidson, and many of you might know him, but he applied for several programs. One of them actually flew him out and he got to visit, and not only that, he got to talk to the other graduate students in the program. And I apologize if I'm repeating anybody, but if you get the chance to talk to some of the grad students or the professors that you talk to, say, hey, is there any chance I could get the email of a grad student who might be able to tell me more about the program? Number one, the busy professor might appreciate sloughing off and sending you to a grad student, but grad students know the dirt and they know what it's like to be a student, and they'll give you a much different perspective than the professor will. One that of course is specific to the student experience. So take advantage of those resources if you can get a hold of those people. And if they invite you out, like, take the free trip, go enjoy getting to know a new place and see if it's the place you might like to go to.
Very good. There is a question some of you have taken a stab at in the chat, but how many programs is typical to apply to? Maybe we could go around and each of us give a quick answer to this. It's quasi-systematic. I've been kind of paying attention to this from my experience, my students' experience. It seems to me that an average ratio of applications to acceptance is something like 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, right? So I applied to like 10 or 11 programs, I think, and I got in, or maybe it was 11 or 12, and I got into like 3. And that I found to be actually quite common amongst both my students, friends who were applying at the time, and people since. And so, you know, depending on how flexible you want to be, if you're super geographically flexible, well, I guess, okay, you have to be super geographically flexible. But depending on how many different options you want, the more you apply to, the more potential options would open themselves up to you. Any other faculty want to chime in? Do you have thoughts on this?
Well, it seems you had a lot more money to apply to programs than I did.
It was
obviously.
Expensive. And I was writing my statements and finishing up last night, so I was paying overnight mailing fees too. That's not an issue anymore, but
yeah. Well, whatever. I won't make any snide comments about spoiled rich kids, but I
worked myself through college construction 35 hours a week, so I'm talking
okay. It's good for you, I'm sure. So I thought I was taking a year off, probably. I hadn't quite decided, so I only applied to 2, but the 2 I really wanted to go to, and I got into one, and I looked at, you know, the more I looked at it, the more I wanted to do it, so I wound up not taking that year off. But I only applied to 2.
I think that depending on what region of the world that you're interested in going into will also depend on how many schools you're going to apply to. Do not make the mistake of only applying to full ride scholarship programs, because those are so highly competitive. If you're going to apply to some of those, make sure that you apply to others that are not, okay? Or you're going to find yourself probably declined on all on all of them, because they're really, really competitive.
Cindy, you're talking about international full ride programs, is that right?
No, national ones, no, US ones, yeah.
It is relatively, I think it's worth knowing, it's relatively common, at least for the higher third tier, let's say, of PhD programs, that you're getting at least a tuition fellowship, if not a stipend to boot. I mean, not everybody, but US programs tend to be, they're much more generous than, say, UK programs or elsewhere.
Yeah, and if you're going overseas, you're not a citizen, so you're not a European Union person, or you're not a citizen of Britain. And so you've got to calculate in, you can only work so many hours, just like our international students are here, that a lot of the grants are going to go to citizens of that particular country. It just depends.
I'm just pointing out that most PhD, and this is specific to PhD, most PhD programs I know in the US provide, you know, tuition plus some additional funding to PhD students. It's not always the case, but it's more often the case than not, in my experience in the US.
Yeah. I think it's more difficult in archaeology, depending on what you're going into. Yeah. So I was going to add something to what you guys were saying about knowing who you want to study with, and particularly because we have so many young women in our program. Really, really, I can't emphasize more what Dr. Allison said, that when you go into a graduate program, particularly a PhD program, and even a master's to some extent, that person that you're working with has a lot of control over you. They will decide basically your future, because are they going to write you a letter of recommendation to go on or not? You know, are they going to give you access to grants or not to get your fieldwork done, et cetera, et cetera. So young women, please check out who you're working with, because in the outside world, and in some cases, even at BYU, there can be a lot of sexual exploitation by somebody who has control over your life. So check around, you know, and I can't emphasize more what Dr. Searcy said. Find out what the fish is like that you're about to work with. Find out what the skivvy is, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're compromised, okay?
Yeah, and I'd add, it's not, I mean, sexual harassment's an issue, and a big one, but it's not the only one too, that there are other ways that those advisor-student relationships can be abusive, even if there's not a sexual element to it. So you want to be careful.
Yeah.
And really, seriously, talking to graduate students in the program, or actually what I did is I wound up talking to the secretary in the department. Just wound up having a good conversation there before I went. That's a good way too. Faculty, I don't know that you'll get the straight story from the faculty. And a lot of places will be fine, but you just want to check, right? You just want to, so I think talking to the students is probably the best strategy.
And then no matter what, don't put yourself in a circumstance that is not, that potentially could not be appropriate, could be inappropriate, okay? So
we have about 8 minutes here. I think we've expended the chat questions. Does anybody want to, do any of you have, it'd be great to get an oral question if anybody wants to actually like speak up. Is there something you're concerned about? What anxieties do you have about applying for graduate school? What things are completely unknown to you? Any other questions you'd all like to pose?
My mouse disappeared, so I can't raise my hand. But I was just wondering if you guys had anything to offer for people who are wanting to go like a medical route, because I'm pre-PA. just if you have any advice or if you've seen students do that, if you have anything to offer.
We've had recently two of our grads, they both get accepted to Utah, Greg, the medical school.
Well, yeah, Medisha.
Yeah, that's a pairing of two students named Madison and Talisha. But yeah, did they both got into the Utah medical school
Yes, they did.
program?
I think they're attending right now as we
I mean,
speak.
honestly, Sarah, the thing that I would do is put you in contact with them because they've navigated it and they know it. So our alumni base actually is, and that's the thing, is like our alum go to all sorts of different things, right? Like everything from academic to law to international business, consulting. A lot of our students go and do MPA programs, Masters in Public Administration, social work. Like they really do go everywhere. So, I mean,
And
one of the best things we can,
forensics. Yeah, forensics.
yeah, one of the best things that we can do is if you have a particular career track in mind is to put you in contact with some of those people. I don't know if there's a better way to facilitate doing that. Greg, you might know a little bit more about that because you're on the.
I'm putting an email right now. I'll put you in touch.
Okay. Well, I mean more broadly to sort of like put alumni in touch with, but yeah, I would encourage you maybe to post something to our department Facebook page because frankly, a lot of our alumni keep track of what's going on in the department through the Facebook page. So if you have questions about, hey, is there an alumni out there who does this? I'd like to learn more about it. There might be, we can get better at some of that social media stuff to keep our alumni in contact with our students, but Sarah, we'll definitely put you in contact with Medisha, as it were, so the two of them can give you some advice on their experience. And both of them just successfully got into programs they wanted to get into, medical programs. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I've got to leave. But thank all of you for coming and all the faculty for participating. So thanks, Jake, for putting this together.
Thanks, Dr. Finley.
Bye. See ya.
we've got 5 more minutes. Any other questions? Thoughts, concerns, anxieties? We've tried to provoke some anxieties by telling you how you're going to be oppressed.
I was going to say, can I counter that? I think
Please,
there's been a lot of,
please do.
been some negative energy. Let me just say, my graduate experience was stressful, as you would expect, but it was a blast. Like, I've made lifelong friends that I'm now colleagues with. Like, we do research projects together. One of them is probably one of my best friends. I called my advisor the other day. He's long since been retired, but I asked him for his advice and he freely gave it to me. So I feel like I have a lifelong, academic coach. I don't know. The experience is definitely trying, and I've heard people say it's not for everyone. But honestly, it's kind of like an endurance race, right? Like, I think most anybody can do it if you're a good student. Meaning, like, if you can keep up on assignments, if you could just be real passionate about the work, I think anybody can get a PhD or a master's degree. Especially a master's degree, being that most are 2 to 3 years. But for me to be totally immersed in the subject matter that I loved, that was the best part about it. I didn't have to take my religion courses. I didn't have to take, I didn't have to take GEs. It was like all archaeology all the time. It was just a blast. So for me, I just wanted to put that out there.
Let me add, Mike. I felt sort of the same way when this was being discussed. It's true, and we know every day more and more how toxic certain places can be and certain programs and this sort of thing. But what kept occurring to me as we were first discussing this is, it's also really important, like, I need to make sure I'm not the toxic one. I'm dead serious. I mean, I'm not sure that there's, I feel like the greater favor to do is to advise them, like Dr. Allison did, about how to keep an eye out for toxic stuff, but also to figure out how to how to handle situations that might not be ideal, because you don't have a telescope powerful enough to spot all of the potential conflicts that you're going to come across. That's just life.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up, Mike. I have to say, I still look back on graduate school nostalgically as like one of the best times of life. I mean, you're basically like an intellectual monk or nun, where all other concerns in life are more or less suspended. I mean, you still have family and stuff, but like I took my family with me to go do field work in Thailand for a year, you know, with no other professional goal in mind than hanging out with Hmong people, going to shaman ceremonies and writing about it, right? Like it really is a fantastic period of time. And I look back on it very nostalgically. I'm writing a piece right now with one of my best friends from graduate school and my advisor. And, you know, I've had an incredible, he loves to, on these long phone calls, debate COVID-19 public policy, public health policy too. I mean, it's, there's dirty stuff out there, but there's a lot of amazing experiences that are literally life-changing.
Yeah, and to be clear, Jake, what I was saying is not that that graduate school is all bad and don't go anywhere or anything. There are a few programs I can think of, like in archaeology, I can think of 3 programs off the top of my head that I would tell people do not go there.
Sure.
You just want to make sure. Some places are very much not that way. I can't think of the slightest problem I had in my own program, right? No problem at all. Still friends with the faculty, still friends with all my co-students, 30 years after I started. And, so you just want to make sure. And question in the chat about places we shouldn't go to. I don't know if I should say them in a recorded.
You can ask Jim offline.
But they're specifically for archaeology, right? So I don't know on the socio-cultural side if there's, but so the worst experiences can be pretty bad. The best experiences can be really, really great. And so you just want to be careful. That's all I'm saying.
Let's let Greg make a comment, and then Ridge's digital arm has got to be getting really tired because he's had his hand up for a while. So
he's a big guy.
Really quick, Greg, and then we'll go to Ridge.
I do think it's worth commenting also about the work of a professor, that there is something that's nice about it. It's pretty intense work as far as it goes. The pay is not fantastic, but the work is, it's stuff like Jacob was just describing. The things that you get to do professionally are if you like research, it's fantastic. If you like students and working with all you wonderful people out there, it's awesome. So there are some really great things about it. I appreciate Mike reminding us to not just poo-poo things. Yeah.
So we are kind of past our time, but Ridge, why don't you pose our final question or comment or whatever? You there, Ridge?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had to turn it off mute. Mine should be pretty quick. So I took the GRE when I applied to the master's program, and now I'm finishing up and applying to PhD programs. And I did really well on like the verbal reasoning, the writing, everything. But like most archaeology students, didn't do too hot on the math portion. And I'm looking at all the programs that I'm interested in going to, and the majority of them actually now doesn't require the GRE. So I'm kind of inclined to not want to take it again. So I just kind of wanted to see what all of your opinions are on how much the GRE matters. I know it's kind of, Mike was saying that it's kind of a way some schools field people out. So yeah, basically how important is the GRE?
I think this is a question you need to ask people at each institution, because it's so idiosyncratic. Like some places, the college will not forward applications to the department if they're not above a certain threshold. That's becoming less common, I think. But some departments don't make admissions decisions based on GREs, but then they'll factor it into their funding priorities. Like it's so idiosyncratic. I don't know what everybody else has to say, but I think you have to ask those people in those programs. I don't know.
Okay.
Some places are doing away with it entirely. Some places it's really important. So yeah, you just kind of have to know the program.
Some people
Okay.
think that our master's program should do away with it, but that's another discussion.
And some don't. So,
Well, my scores were apparently good enough to get into this program, so hopefully that counts for something.
yeah, and it's true here. Like our students here tend to do really well on the verbal portion and not so well on the quantitative. In my PhD program, there were a lot more higher quantitative scores, let's just say. And with computation.
But I think the pattern you just mentioned, Jim, I think the pattern you just mentioned is nationwide, essentially. I think
What's that? I didn't.
for anthropology students,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a more general pattern, that people will do well on the two bookend sections and maybe not as well on quant. And, you know, depending on the program you're applying to, that matters.
Well, it depends on the program. And I was in a program that tended to actually target people who did well on both verbal and quantitative.
Yeah, sure.
And had
Yeah, and I've seen some of the
went-
programs I've been looking at actually say that they do take the GRE, but don't really care about the quantitative. They care more about the verbal and writing and everything. So it's kind of just seems like you're right.
Depends
it
on the
just is
program.
on the program.
Yeah, it depends on the program. See, I went to a program where statistics was really important and doing computer quantitative stuff was important. And they really targeted students who did well on both parts of the GRE. So, but they had money to offer students and they attracted them there. So, I don't know, it was a fun place to be if you like stats and computers.
Yeah. Sounds like a blast.
So I suppose as the moderator, it's incumbent on me to say, okay, we are actually 4 minutes over, so maybe we'll cut it off there.